Jay Leno asked about taxes. I think he was very nice, I thought, on the program, but he was a little uneasy about this idea of our tax position. So somebody had told me, they said he likes the flat tax. So that's when he asked me. He says, "What kind of a tax?" Well, I like it. I like the flat tax as long as it's flat, not zero. They talk about the housing bubble. That's just a reflection of the dollar crisis. And I'm on the banking committee, and periodically Bernanke as well as Greenspan always would come before the committee. Next week there's an emergency meeting called up on Thursday, and I was scheduled to be elsewhere, but I thought, well, I've been there for one of the major issues, to talk about the monetary issue for all these years, so this will be on Thursday and join the economic committee. But the dollar is crucial. It is the reflection of an entire country on how they're dealing with their finances. If your currency is going down, there's never a justification for it. There's no moral justification, there's no economic justification, there's no trade justification. This idea that if you have a weak dollar, all of a sudden you're going to have all these fancy exports, it just isn't true, because prices go up so quickly, it wipes out that advantage. But the moral reason why you have to oppose this easy money, weak dollar is, what if somebody happened to have saved money? A few people still save money in this country. And if you have money in the bank and we have a government that's deliberately depreciating the currency at a 5 or a 10% rate, and now actually it's going faster than that against some other currencies. It's literally theft. Inflation. In this campaign, and hopefully as a consequence of the campaign, that we can follow in the footsteps of Jefferson and Jackson. They didn't like central banking. They got rid of the first and the second bank. So I think it's due time we talk seriously about getting rid of the Federal Reserve. Tax that allows governments to grow, and the penalty and the pain is delayed, and of course the victims are hidden. Nobody knows. It's not like they came here and said, okay, you need to put in $2,000 or $3,000 more taxes this year, but they'll have you lose your purchasing power of $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 a year just by depreciating the money. So this to me is one of the monstrosities that we have, and we have to deal with it. Now, my proposal is simply deal with foreign policy. Foreign policy is the easiest place to change, and people don't like it. So, we go to the Constitution, we go to the founders, and what kind of foreign policy was advised? It is something called non-intervention. In simple terms, it's mind our own business. Done for many, many decades, especially the 20th century. We became very interventionist. We, as Republicans, have drifted from the traditional Republican position. Actually, the Republican Party has benefited more than the Democratic Party by solving the problems of wars that were started by the other party, with Korea and Vietnam, and actually even in the year 2000. Our party, the Republican Party, ran on a program of a humble foreign policy, no nation building, no policing of the world. But we need to live up to that, not only because it's good and right, it's absolutely necessary for us to do that. Now, of course, the position I've held on Iraq is very clear. Most everybody knows about it, and very simply, we ought to just come home from Iraq. Interventionist policy also means we ought to, don't you think it's about time to come home from Korea? Yeah! How about coming home from Europe? I mean, now the reason why this is so important is, first off, what we're doing is liable to spread. I mean, right now, the candidates on both sides are advocating not taking off any option dealing with Iran, even a nuclear option. Can you imagine this? Here we are in a position in our history where we are the ones who are starting the wars and threatening to spread the wars. That's not our position. It's damaging. It's horrible. So one of the first things I would ever do if I were to be the president is I would Move away from Iran. Stop threatening them. Take off the sanctions. Talk to this individual. He's a thug. But Ahmadinejad has nothing to do with running the country over there. He's a noisy guy that he's not in control of the military. He's not in control of the political system at all. And what have we done over the years? What did Eisenhower do after Khrushchev was in our country banging a shoe and Khrushchev threatening? He had 40,000 nuclear weapons. He says, I'm going to bury you. We'll bury you. Well, they went out the next day and drove around in a convertible, unprotected, through the streets in Washington, D.C. If he could talk to Khrushchev, Kennedy talked to Khrushchev, he neutralized that whole thing about the Cuban crisis. I remember it well because I had been drafted at that time. But he said, they made a deal. Yes, we'll take the missiles out of Cuba, you take them out of Turkey. We didn't have to go to nuclear war. And then people say, yes, but you got to be tough, you got to be firm, you don't have to concede. What did Ronald Reagan do? He was tough, he firm, he has strong national defense, and he said, tear down this wall. At the same time, within weeks, he had an agreement with Gorbachev to have a nuclear treaty, a nuclear weapons treaty. So there's no reason in the world, if we've talked to the Soviets under the worst of conditions, and we've talked to the Chinese under the worst of conditions, and things have become improved, isn't it conceivable that it would make sense that we can talk to third world nations that don't even have weapons? The relationship of the foreign policy and our finances is we just can't afford it. All empires end because of financial reasons. That's why the British Empire disappeared. That's why the Soviet Empire disappeared. The Roman Empire. They spend too much, they destroy their currency, the pound collapsed at the same time the British Empire collapsed. The dollar is dropping rapidly right now, and it's a very serious problem, which means that what's coming is a lot more inflation, a lot higher interest rates, and a weakened economy. And that's why we have to cut some spending. Politically, it's a lot easier for us to sell cutting spending overseas before we deal with some of the programs we shouldn't even have here. So my argument is you can literally cut hundreds of billions of dollars if we reject this notion of our foreign empire. At the same time, there's absolutely no need to throw anybody out in the street who's dependent on programs that have been designed over the years. We can do that. But if we don't straighten out and there's a dollar collapse, believe me, there'll be a lot more people out in the street and the empire is going to go anyway. So the only common sense approach is just look to the Constitution, look for guidance, look for our traditions, look to what it means to be a free country, look what it means to allow individuals to decide for themselves what their lives should be and how they should use their own lives, and, of course, get to spend all the fruits of their labor. There would be more incentives and we would have more prosperity. Constant war mentality, whether it's a war going on in Iraq and a potential war in Iran, but also this idea that we have to have perpetual war against Islamofascism and against terrorism when you don't even define it. We don't even know what they're talking about. Their tactics, and it's very vague. So I would say that under those conditions, the greater threat is not from external forces. It is from internal forces. It's a threat against our civil liberties.